Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with Tycon Systems. Today's host is Seth Ellen, and he is their Sales and Marketing Manager, and he will be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and Seth will answer them at the end of today's presentation. Seth, I am finished for now. Thank you so much for being with us today. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Great, thanks so much, Julie. I appreciate you having me. So for those that are new to Tycon Systems or haven't heard of Tycon Systems, I want to kind of do a quick overview of what we do. So we specialize in, we have three major brands. We have the Tycon Solar, which is our remote power equipment. This would be for off-grid solutions, powering security cameras, Wi-Fi or wireless access points, completely off-grid, as well as battery backup systems. So maybe you have AC power, but want to have 8 hours, 24 hours of extra battery backup. We also have our Tycon Wireless, where we designed some wireless bridges at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz frequency, just a simple plug and play backhaul. And then our Tycon Power, and this is a wide variety of DC low voltage converters, PoE injectors, and our PoE switches. So today's presentation, we're going to focus on our PoE switches. So a little bit of background on PoE, or Power over Ethernet. We may have a wide variety of knowledge background with the attendees right now. So I kind of want to start with the basics so that when I'm discussing what PoE is later on, you'll have a good understanding. So before 2003, there wasn't really a standard when it came to power over Ethernet. So power over Ethernet is, all devices require power, whether it's 12 volt or 24 volt or AC input. And then they started designing, they had devices that would require data throughput as well. So maybe some IP cameras, VoIP, wireless bridges, access points and stuff. In an effort to consolidate how much cable would be required, they designed an Ethernet cable that has 4 pairs or 8 wires. Each 4 pair has a positive and negative, and you're able to run data and power through one cable. So that's just eliminated the need for extra cable. So what PoE does, initially it was 24 volt passive, and there wasn't really a standard. So in 2003, the IEEE, or the Institute of Electrical Engineers, I'm missing an E. Oh, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. So IEEE, they designed or developed a standard of 802.3. So initially in 2003, it was 802.3 AF, and this provided power up to 15 watts to power devices. And so the difference, we would call this 802.3 compliant. It's at 48 volt, technically a minimum of 44 volts, but typically, the standard would be about 48 volts, would provide up to 15 watts of power, and there's a handshake between the power injector and the device it's powering. This prevented from units receiving too much voltage. So if a device was passive, it wouldn't accept that power so that you could protect your expensive equipment. Several years later, I believe it was in 2009, more devices were requiring more power. And so they developed the 802.3 AT, or PoE Plus. This would provide up to 30 watts of power to your devices. Well, fast forward, now cameras and big access points, they're requiring 40 watts, 50 watts, 60 watts. And so in 2018, they released the 802.3 BT power. And so these are all standards or compliant power over Ethernet. And so this will help as I'm talking about our different PoE switches and what they do. So now they have the PoE Plus or the 802.3 BT. Now, as you can see in the types 3 and 4, there are some proprietary power injectors. For example, the UPoE would be a Cisco proprietary power supply. There's also the 4-pair PoE. So when you're anything above 30 watts really requires, in order to provide enough power, you need to use all 4 pairs in that Ethernet cable. So you're still able to provide data, but now you're sending power through all 4 pairs of wire within that cable. So hopefully that makes sense. You know, if you have more questions on that, we can dive in a little bit deeper. I didn't want to spend too much time on it, as some of you may already know. But so these are the different types of standards that the IEEE has released into the market. Passive still exists, 24-volt passive. Really, there's not a lot of devices any lower than that. Used to have some 15-volt and 18-volt, but really kind of 24-volt is more of a common passive PoE. There is 48-volt PoE, and with the standard, the 802.3 AT, when we say 48 volts, it's really 56. Most devices that are 802.3 compliant will be able to handle the 56 volts. So because typically you're doing longer cable runs. So when we started, we designed several different products, and so we'll start kind of from smallest to largest. So we call this our PoE extender, or our 3-port PoE switch. This is a 48-volt input at 802.3 AF or AT, so up to 30 watts. And so the maximum distance that you can run Cat5 cable would be 100 meters. And so at 100 meters, you would either need to have your equipment plugged in, or you would add a PoE extender. And so that's what this little switch does. So this actually allows you to run 100 meters, plug it in, and now you have 2 802.3 AT output. You don't need an external power supply. You just need obviously a little enclosure to put the switch to make it weatherproof. But this allows you to now power 2 devices from this one switch. Just helps consolidate that cable and extend. And you can run another 100 meters from this. So that's why we call it our PoE extender, or a 3-port PoE switch. Next would be our unmanaged switches. Our unmanaged switches, we have several in our 5-port series. They are all gigabit throughput. All ports have built-in surge protection. And then we have a wide industrial temperature range. And I'll dive in a little bit deeper when we cover each one. I highlighted our most unique switches, so you can kind of get an idea of different applications that you can use these with. So first we have our SW5G-NC. NC stands for non-compliant or passive. So what you put into this switch, we have a green terminal block, a wire terminal block on the back side of the switch. What power you provide to it it is a DC input, is what you would receive on the PoE out. So if you supply with a 12-volt power supply, you would have 12-volt PoE coming out from the switch, as well as 24-volt in, 24 out. You do have the 5th port would be the data uplink. So you can power your with a power supply on the back end, have your data input, and then have 4 ports out at whatever requirement you have, 24 volt, 48 volt. As you see, I put in the temperature range for each device because they are slightly different, but all of them have at least -20 Celsius to +75 Celsius. With our SW5G-24, and we do have a HP version or high power version. What this switch does is very similar. It's the same form factor. You've got the wire terminal input, but it accepts 12 to 36 volts in and converts all 4 ports at 802.3 AT up to 35 watts per port, or a maximum of 70 watts. So obviously you have to balance how much output power is needed to power your devices. The HP version offers 140 watts total output if you're providing 24 volt DC input. So this is a very popular switch. Most battery banks that people are using are either 12 or 24 volt, but they need to power those PoE cameras. A lot of PTZs require that 802.3 AT input. And so this is a great switch, low cost switch that'll be able to power all those different devices. So we see this used in many different applications. But then we had people say, you know, we want to power these PoE cameras, but we also have a wireless access point. And you know, manufacturers have different power requirements. So we designed our Versa switch, so the SW5G Versa. And what this does, it does require 48 volt input, but it gives you one port at high PoE or 60 watts, the PoE++, and this would power your high powered access point, you know, the high gigahertz, you know, low range access point or bridge, or your PTZ camera. And it also gives you 3 ports at 802.3 AT, and then 1 port at 24 volt passive, so you can power that low power access point. So all the different devices can be powered from this one switch. Now, all of these 5-port switches are unmanaged, or what we call, you know, dumb switches. So they're not going to, there's no layer 2 management with it, but it is going to provide that power and data to the different devices. And when you think of these switches, it's basically lining up 4 or 5 PoE injectors, but consolidating all under one roof. So this is a great switch for many different types of applications. Lastly, in 2018, when they released the 802.3 BT standard, we haven't seen a huge influx of high power devices yet. Kind of 60, 70 watts is still the range. Now 802.3 BT will be rated up to 90 watts. Like I said, we don't have a lot of devices that require that much power, but we are starting to see an increase. So PTZ cameras, infrared, all of this that, you know, starting to have that 70, 80 watt power requirement. And so we released our SW5G-D-BT. Now, you know, we try to make our part numbers as intuitive as possible. So when you see the TP, that stands for Tycon Power, SW for switch, 5 would be the amount of ports, G stands for gigabit, D is that 802.3 standard, and then this would be the BT. So this is a great switch when you are trying to power you know, several of those PTZ cameras from the same device. So this would give you 90 watts per port. If you don't have that requirement, maybe you're just powering some AT devices, you can provide it with the 2-pair wire, or this also has the 4-pair wire option. Now, and I failed to mention, all of these standards are backwards compatible. So if you have an 802.3 AT switch, it'll still power your 802.3 AF device. So just because it basically says it's, you know, capable of 30 watts, but it's only going to send you 15 if that's what your device requires. So you don't need to worry about providing too much wattage. Voltage is where we really have to be concerned, is that we need to make sure that we're providing the right voltage for that. So even if you are powering some AT and BT devices, this switch would work for you, just knowing that you're having up to that 90 watts per port option. Then, you know, obviously we have a high demand, and we really listen to our users. That's where we get a lot of our inspiration. Our engineers, our sales team, you know, we listen to customers' requests and requirements, and so managed switches obviously was an important release for us. Now this gives you the management capabilities through your console port or IP. It has a industrial operating temperature, and all of our managed switches also provide or give you the SFP fiber ports. Now, if you don't need fiber, you can connect to a copper port to give you some data output as well, 2 extra ports for that. All of our managed switches, I should say all of our switches, are DIN rail mounted. So these have the built-in DIN rail capabilities. Some of the other switches, the unmanaged switches, come with DIN clip kits, which can be added, connected to those little flanges on the side, and you can DIN rail mount them. but this has the built-in DIN rail mounts, and this gives you that that managed capability for each of these next switches that I'm going to discuss. So with this series, we have 4-port and 8-port gigabit 802.3 BT output options, again with the 2 fiber ports, so really a 6 and a 10-port PoE switch. It does have layer 2 features, so the QoS also allows for VLAN, port mirroring, port isolation. I'm not a networking guru, but if you are, then suffices to say that it is a layer 2 plus interface. So these devices give you that 802.3 BT output on each port. Now with that, we do have some customers that come to us and say, that's great, but I still need to power that 24 volt access point. And so we designed this small inline PoE converter. So this will accept 802.3 AF, AT, or BT, or even 48 volt passive, and then give you, it'll down convert down to that 24 volt. So an inexpensive option to be able to add to that switch so that you are able to still power all of your devices off of that main switch. And so I just wanted to throw in this accessory just because it's a very handy tool to have when you do need to power that 24 volt device from a managed switch. And recently in the last 6 months, we released 2 more 8-port switches, and we're excited about these because we had many customers come to us and say, that's great that you have the PoE converter, but I may need a couple. Could we design something? And so we did. We went, our engineers went and designed this industrial switch that allows you to configure any port to be 802.3 AF or AT or 24 volt passive. And this gives you up to 30 watts per port. So you can select 4 ports at compliant, 4 ports passive, or any combination that you see fit. So just a very unique switch, very powerful device. It is metal enclosure like all of our other managed switches, so it gives you that high industrial voltage or temperature range. Obviously, you do need to still have it in an enclosure, but we have these switches in very cold climates, northern U.S., Canada, as well as the deserts of Nevada, as well as the Middle East. So very extreme highs and lows temperature range for this. And then our next switch is our SW8G AT-BT24. Obviously still comes with that SFP. So again, all of our managed switches require that 48 volt input to provide the PoE out, but now you can configure ports 1 and 2 at 802.3 AT or 24 volt passive. Ports 3 and 4 can be configured to 802.3 BT at 90 watts or 802.3 AT at the 30 watts. And then ports 5 through 8, you can have 802.3 AT. So it gives you a good combination. You can power several different IP cameras, as well as some of those high power PTZ cameras and your access points. So many different combinations that you can do with these industrial managed switches to provide all the different applications that you may see. If there's something that we've missed in our designs and you're like, it'd be great if we had this, we love hearing that feedback. We're always looking at ways to improve and stay ahead of the technology. A lot of times some of the manufacturers will release a product, but then maybe not have a PoE injector, or you need that DC converter because you have that DC output from your battery bank, and you need a DC switch. So all of these switches are DC powered in. And so with that, we also released our PSDIN series. So very simple power supplies, obviously a 48 volt out, and we have a 120 watt and a 240 watt option. So a great DIN rail mounted accessory to be able to provide power, isolated power to those switches. So let's see, I think that's the end of our slides. So I probably went a little bit too quick for everybody. Hopefully I spoke clearly enough that you're able to understand, and maybe, but I'm going to turn this time back over to Julie, see if you have any questions for me.
Thank you very much, Seth, for that wonderful presentation. And yes, I do have some questions for you. Let's go ahead and get started with the first one. Let's see. First question is, what are the warranties on your PoE extenders?
So our PoE extender has a 3-year warranty. All of our unmanaged switches also have a 3-year warranty, and then our managed switches have a 5-year warranty.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next question here for you. Okay. Let's see what it says. You may have just answered this. I'm not sure. For your unmanaged switches, does it need to be the same power draw output for each port, or each port can have a different voltage?
So we do have let's see, with all of the unmanaged, we have the wire terminal, so it would just be a one input. So for example, the Versa switch, let's go back to that slide. Let's jump back a little bit. Sorry, hopefully this doesn't give you some vertigo or anything.
No, this is fine.
So with our unmanaged switches, this would be a 1 voltage input. And then, so that would give you the 1 voltage out. So if you need to power different voltage devices, this would not be the switch for you. This also takes 1 voltage in. So it would be anything between 12 to 36 volts in. It would convert everything to that 802.3 AT output. This one would also just the 1 voltage in, so 44 to 57 volts in, and then you would have the different voltage output. We also do have a multi-switch. I didn't highlight that one today. It's not used as much just because of our different switch or other switch options, but you can provide dual voltage inputs. So you could have a wire input, a wire terminal input of 24 volt to get 24 volt off of 2 ports, and then you can have a 48 volt in and have 48 volts going in and have a 48 volt output. So hopefully that answers the question. Most of these devices will just require a 1 voltage input, and then the switch will provide the power needed based on the type of switch that it is.
Thank you so much for that, Seth. Next question here for you. Can you explain NC passive a little bit more? And it says here 12 in, 12 out, 24 in, 24 out, 48 in, 48 out. Is that for all ports or split equally?
So that's for each port. So for example, and you're not going to see a lot of devices that require 12 volt PoE, okay? That's not, I haven't seen anything in probably 10 years. We do still see some 18 volt PoE, but really hard to find a PoE or a 18 volt power supply to provide that. So most common is going to be your 24 volt passive. So passive just means it's passing through that voltage. So with our non-compliant switch or our passive switch, what you provide will give you that voltage on all ports. So here, let's say that you provide it with a 24 volt power supply. You'll have 24 volts on port 1, 24 volts on port 2, 24 volts on port 3, and port 4. So it doesn't split that voltage because you don't have, let's say that you plug in a 24 volt power supply and divide that by 4, there's no 6 volt PoE devices in existence, right? So it's going to provide you at 24 volt or 48 volt on each individual port.
Seth, thank you so much for that overview. Next question here for you. Are the units IP67 rated or primarily indoor devices?
They are indoor devices, so they do not have the IP 67 rating. So you would need to have in a weatherproof enclosure, whether it's a NEMA 3, NEMA 4, IP66, IP67. You would want it in a weatherproof enclosure, though.
Thank you for that, Seth. Next question here is actually a comment. Perhaps you could mention something about this. Let's see. Regarding TP SW5G Versa, and that seems like a great product for towers.
Absolutely. Because you know, like I said, most manufacturers have different power requirements. I mean, the longer I've been doing this, you know, I do a lot of system designs for tower sites to power off of solar or as battery backup, and there are really no two designs the same, right? And so customers will come to us and say, well, I've got this access point, and I read data sheets all day long. It's super exciting. Sarcasm intended. No, and so we'll see a data sheet. It'll say, okay, this is 24-volt passive. Okay, easy enough. Then you've got maybe 2 cameras that require, what I really see with cameras are 12-volt DC or 48-volt PoE at the 802.3 standard, or sometimes even 24-volt AC. And so, you know, your normal standard power plug is 110 volts AC. Well, this would require a 24-volt AC. So we do have power converters for all of that. And so really this Versa switch is just so unique because it allows you to play with the different manufacturers without having to have a separate PoE injector for each one. Really consolidates the equipment that's needed at the site, eliminates opportunities for failure.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Seth. Next question here for you. Most of your devices are all plug and play. Is that correct?
Yes, with the exception, our managed switches does have a GUI, and so you would need to, you know, do your configuration. I was gonna add a screenshot and then just ran out of time as I was putting this presentation together, but it does have an online GUI, and so you will need to do some configuration because you want to select which ports they have. But all these others are plug and play, right? You provide the power. There's no management that you need to go in and adjust or change anything. It's all easy to go, easy to use, very simple. We do provide user guides and user manuals, all of which are available online as well for each part. And so you're able to, yeah, like I said, just be able to plug in. What you see is what you're getting out. Those managed will require a little bit of user interface or user management to it, though.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Seth. A couple more questions here for you. Next one is regarding the PSDIN. What is the maximum output power?
So for that, we have the 2 options, 48-volt out at 120 watts, that's the one on the left, and up to 240 watts. So that is the max output power for both of those.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next question here. Can one connect a PoE managed switch to a regular switch?
Typically, you're not going to use 2 switches together. You know, something about like so let me back up a little bit. So with our managed switches, they have the layer 2 capabilities, which means that you can have separate ports going, like let's say you have isolation between ports. So port 1 might be going to your accounting, right? And then all of your accounting will be running off of that port. And then port 2 would be, let's say, for sales. And we don't necessarily want those 2 communicating between each other. Maybe let's say that you have a business park that you're providing all the networking power and data for that, right? And you have company, you know, a dentist's office that's running off of port 1 and they're doing all of their stuff. Well, we don't want them being able to see what's going on in the office next door that's maybe an accounting firm. And so there's that port isolation. And so you could run a switch off of that. So let's say that you have that managed switch in your networking closet, and then you run to that dentist's office, and then you could have a dumb switch to provide power to the different options. So yes, you can use those together if you're doing those types of applications. If I'm, a lot of our customers are WISP customers or wireless internet service providers. So they have everything integrated together. So that's where I guess my initial confusion was. But now that I see, when you're doing separate accounts, then yes, absolutely, you can use those switches together.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Seth. Next question, this may be similar, I'm not sure. Can a PoE switch be used as a normal switch?
Can a PoE switch? Yes. So, with our managed switches, it'll accept, I believe the ranges, and I didn't look this up beforehand. It'll accept, I believe, 12 to 36 volts for the managed switches, and then it just is a data switch. Basically, it's not providing power out. If you want power out, then you need to provide it with 48 volt. All of our unmanaged switches will just provide PoE output. There's no way to turn off the power from that. So, but if you do need to, if you're looking maybe at mid-span, we do have some rack-mounted mid-span options, 12-port, 24-port options there. So, but if you're looking for just like doing a managed switch, but only providing data on certain ports, yes, you can do that and turn off the power.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Seth. Last question here for you. If we go to your website, can we find customer service, tech support, perhaps a community forum and all that good stuff?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have several options. So tyconsystems.com is our website. So that's where you can find all the data sheets, information on that. But we do have a chat that we monitor Monday through Thursday. We are closed on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but we do have a support team that also checks. We do have a ticket support system, so you can log into that, and we do have tech supports that check in the evenings and the weekends. We do have email support, and we also have our phone number listed, so you can call in and talk to either pre-sales support. So if you have some questions on what type of device you should use, or we have obviously post-sale support. And so we absolutely want to help as much as possible. If there's any issue with a device, maybe you don't understand or need some help with the configuration, we do have tech support that is available to help you anytime.
Seth, thank you so much for answering all of those questions for us today. And also thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. And if anyone has any further questions, of course, please feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to view any of the products mentioned or shown today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And also, please remember this webinar presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel so you can view it again. Seth, thank you for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. And until the next time, have a fantastic day, everybody.
Thank you, Julie.
You are welcome. Bye-bye now.